My fellow judges are.
I am Robert Allison. I am a history professor at Suffolk University in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm really pleased to be here with you this afternoon.
And I'm Jack Barlow. I am a professor of politics at Juniata College in Pennsylvania.
And you are, and your teacher.
Hello, I'm Ethan Ringer.
Hi, I'm Sam Fiddler.
Hi, I'm John, and our coach is Mr. Sam Olmschneider.
Well, again, congratulations and good to meet you. We're looking forward to hearing your answer to question 1 out of Unit 2. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? Again.
In a letter to Gouverneur Morris discussing issues which might be important at the convention, George Washington claimed, "There is not a man living who wishes more sincerely than I do to see the abolition of slavery." James Madison refused to mention it directly in the document because he thought it wrong to admit in the Constitution that there could be property in men. Although many delegates to the convention viewed slavery as malign, its economic entrenchment, coupled with implications for representation, made resolution at the convention impossible.
The delegates focused most of their efforts on representation in the national legislature, at least 33 of 116 days, despite disagreement between proportional representation offered by the Virginia Plan and state equality proposed by the New Jersey Plan in response. The convention truly resolved this issue via the Great Compromise by integrating both systems. In contrast, the constitutional compromises on slavery, notably the Slave Trade Clause, the Fugitive Slave Clause, and the Three-Fifths Compromise, would only serve as delaying mechanisms.
This delay was permissible to the convention's attendees because they viewed slavery as subordinate to the goal of national unity. However, this postponement would result in decades of political tumult and human suffering. Regional divisions became abundantly clear during the debates over the Missouri Compromise. Northern and Southern politicians tried to compromise on slavery in the 1850s, but failed. For these reasons, the decision by the convention to postpone decisions about slavery and empower states with slave interests had the most destructive influence.
Another highly contested issue at the Philadelphia Convention was the distribution of power between federal and state governments. In his Virginia plan, Madison proposed mixing elements of confederal and unitary systems. His bicameral legislature would include one house elected by the people and one indirectly appointed by the states. He argued against confederacy, but supposed that a single unitary republic would be unattainable for so large a nation. So he proposed a compound republic. This would serve as a middle ground, which, quote, may support a due supremacy of the national authority and not exclude the local authorities. William Patterson's New Jersey plan defended state power more than Madison's compound republic with a unicameral legislature and state equality. However, the Great Compromise's bicameralism ultimately supported Madison's partly federal, partly national plan.
Madison also proposed a federal veto on state laws, writing, "Experience has evinced a constant tendency in the states to encroach on the federal authority," saying that a veto would uphold the supremacy clause while avoiding violent coercion to enforce it. Skeptics like Elbridge Gerry and John Dickinson believed that a federal negative could be abused for political gain, and Thomas Jefferson wrote that a negative would, quote, "attempt to mend a small hole by covering the whole garment." Ultimately, the delegates voted against the proposal, but the issue remained.
Without a federal negative, debates about conflicting federal and local laws arose for the Alien and Sedition Acts and in John C. Calhoun's infamous arguments for secession. In recent years, states continue to contradict federal laws for issues such as marijuana, gun rights, abortion, immigration, and school choice.
Issues of representation today prove just as contentious as in 1787, though today they are complicated by questions of race and popular enfranchisement. While the 14th and 15th Amendment attempted to recognize Black Americans' right to vote, later legislation such as the Voting Rights Act was necessary to actually vindicate that right. The United States should amend the Constitution to include the Voting Rights Act.
America's territories present issues of both federalism and representation. While Article 4, Section 3 of the Constitution outlines the process by which Congress can make territories states, granting them representation, American citizens who live in territories have no voting power at the national level. Instead, each territory has one non-voting member, or two in the case of Puerto Rico. The Constitution should be amended to address this lack of representation by giving each territory's government the power to enact a binding referendum on statehood if the territory has a population at least equivalent to the smallest state. Even before becoming a state, territory should have full representation in the House, but have no representation in the Senate.
As for federalism, the US government can impose their will on territories. For example, Puerto Rico only gained self-governance in 1952. The Constitution should be amended to ensure self-governance of territories by extending the mandate that all states have Republican forms of government in Article 4, Section 4 to territories, as well as extending the 10th Amendment to territories. Thank you. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you. Just want to start at the beginning where you did, and that was the slavery question. It sounded as though you basically are saying that the framers and founders chose money over morals. I mean, that's how I heard what you said. Did I hear you correctly?
Well, I would say, looking at the framers, it's a wide group of people. And so when we look at certain framers, such as Charles Pinckney from South Carolina, he certainly pushed to keep slavery despite any moral grievances, while framers such as Gouverneur Morris pushed more for against it. But what we saw at the convention, I think, was essentially a punting of the issue to the future to try to have it resolved later on. And so to some degree, it was a choosing of money over morals, but it was also, I think, a refusal to address it at the time.
I think it's also, as we elaborated in our paper, it was a concession to the southern states who did have slavery much more economically entrenched in their societies. But without that concession, the Constitutional Convention wouldn't have been a success. So as I elaborated on my partner's point, it was more of a punt.
Okay, thank you.
You think the country is simply too big to be under one government, however artfully framed?
Well, I would argue, as Madison did in Federalist 10, that extended republics are actually better because they limit the power of factions. He looked towards previous historic republics and direct democracies really as small, insular, too aggressive towards the whims of the masses, and that a larger republic, especially one with his compound republic and federalism, would be able to enact a better use of Enlightenment ideals.
Yeah, but he's talking about a republic that extended from Maine to Georgia. Now we're talking about a republic, and you mentioned, Puerto Rico, Guam, other territories. It's a global. Is it possible to have a republic over this large an area with such a diverse population?
I think it is possible. I think the federalism is part of what makes it possible. Is you can have different governments at a more local and state level, and then a different set of governments at a national level. That allows sort of that tiered system for different governments to address different, more local issues. But I also think the creation of technology and the expansion of technology has made distance less of an issue as transportation and communication has become more instantaneous. And so while it is a bigger distance, in a lot of ways, it's actually much smaller than in the framing era.
Yeah, technology has definitely played a huge role, especially in the nationalization of our politics, with technology such as Twitter, Facebook, and the nationalization of politics and the organization of parties today. It's made issues extremely national, even at local and state levels. Just for example, in my own county of Hanover County, the local government officials are often forced to declare which presidential candidate they would support. So I think that technology has made it much more feasible for to govern a larger nation.
I would push back slightly against my colleague's statement and say that the nationalization of party politics, as well as the devolution of power from the states to the federal government, has made it harder for such a large republic to remain peaceful. I think that more power should be given to the states, and cases in the Supreme Court, like Abergeville v. Hodges, have taken away states' rights to differ politically from each other.
Do you think it would improve things if we made the Senate more of a proportional body? Madison was in favor of making the Senate, giving the Senate proportional representation, and he thought it was a disaster that they didn't have it. So should we restore Madison's vision there?
I think we should restore Madison's vision, or at least become closer to it. For example, the German version of the Senate has a tiered system where different states have different numbers of senators depending on their population, still reserving the power of the states as entities while keeping a more proportional element. And so I think a transition to that could be helpful in the future. And of course, we've seen these transitions in the Senate before, such as the direct election of senators in the 17th Amendment.
I would favor a system similar to the German model, in which there are tiers of representatives for the higher house, in which, if you have X number of people, you have X number of senators. If you have more, then you can have the same. And there are groupings rather than strictly proportional as the House would be, because I think that it would still allow for more equality while maintaining the vision of the framers of the Compound Republic.
There are some significant drawbacks, though, to making the Senate more proportional. First of all, it would undermine federalism because it'd be more nationally focused. Second of all, as we've seen in Germany that have embraced proportional systems of representation, we've seen increases of extremist parties such as the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. And also it may lead to a decline, not immediately, but over time, to our two-party system. As Lee Drutman actually argues in his book, The Party Doom Loop.
Well, can I ask, Gouverneur Morris proposed this at the convention, and it was the structure of the Massachusetts Constitution to have the Senate actually proportional to tax revenues. So states that contribute more to the federal treasury should have more senators, or in Massachusetts, the counties that contributed more would have more senators. Would that be a better way to represent a different interest other than population?
Well, I think the first thing we have to think about when thinking about Gouverneur Morris's comparison to today is the 16th Amendment that included income tax as part of the federal raising of money, and that completely shifts how the federal government.
Yeah, but some states do contribute more. I mean, populations of some states do contribute more to the federal treasury than others.
So I don't think that would be the best way to represent. I think that would move away from the idea of one person, one vote that's been kind of established in US government, and move away from majority rule. And so I think it's not exactly the same for at that time as it was today, and I don't think it would be the best option.
Some of the attendees at the convention did propose using wealth as a measure of apportioning representation in Congress. However, the reason why they didn't do it is because it was hard to actually define wealth. Was it property? Was it just simply hard money? I think that problem still persists today. How do we define a state's contribution? So I think that has to be refined more before we can embrace that model.
So to bring about the constitutional changes that you want, would you favor a constitutional convention?
I think for the amendments that we have proposed, which are not major restructurings of the government, a simple amendment process would be better for passing these amendments, as I think in a constitutional convention, the sorts of issues we want to focus on, such as territories, may lose focus to the much more major issues, such as simply the structure of the executive and legislative and judicial branch. And so for our more specific focus, I think a simple amendment would be better.
So do you expect the legislature in Idaho to care about the territories?
I think it's possible that they could pass an amendment. Obviously, politics, people pass things for different reasons, and Idaho could have a personal reason.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for judging us today.
Well,
Thank you so much.
we get to chat with you first, and you might not want to thank us after you hear what we have to say. Okay. I don't remember. Did I read that one?
You did. It's your.
Then I guess I get to talk to you first.
Go first.
I enjoyed the talk. I have to say, I'm gonna hurry up and do this. So I'm not sure that repeating to me that they punted things down the road answered the question I was asking about money over morals. I really was listening when you read your statement. Because the question that I have is based on the fact that we had a lot of really great aspirational ideas, and we said wonderful things about people being, we the people, we talk all that stuff. And then, I don't know, but I have a sneaking suspicion that, well, clearly the slaves and a whole bunch of the women and a bunch of the white dudes who didn't have enough property would not have felt that this was a government paying them attention. And so, there's a huge part of me that says we did a lot of good talking and conversation. And then when it came time to do some stuff, we decided, no, folks, we're going to create a country, and the rest of this, y'all solve this later. And I'm not sure that I think that was what was intended. Having said that, you all did a good job of talking about the things that I think this question appropriately involved. I was glad to hear some of the references you made, and I liked your constitutional suggestions. Those were not the things that I've been listening to all day. You all did a good job. Thank you.
Okay, I agree. I mean, I think I noticed that my colleagues and I were asking you somewhat more difficult, open-ended questions than we have been today, because we really enjoyed hearing what you had to say. And I was impressed with how much you knew. I mean, bringing in, Elbert Gary and John Dickinson being skeptical about the legislative veto, and then the great quote from Jefferson and other things, that it's clear you are very well grounded in these arguments. And then, the whole idea of extended republics and the fact that you can disagree with each other about these things. I mean, I was impressed listening to you discussing all of this. And I wish we had the day to spend with you just talking, because these are three people who clearly understand the subject, are thinking about the subject. And I am really pleased to have been able to listen to you and discuss this with you. And I look forward to hearing more from you in the years ahead as you're grappling with all of these issues as citizens of what we hope will be one extended republic for a long time. So thank you.
Yeah, you guys are our 11th team today. It's early in the afternoon, and it would be real easy for us to fall asleep. And what you guys did was keep us awake. You made it interesting. You're well informed. You put it together nicely. So I want to thank you for that. I think that the whole issue of a congressional veto over state laws is fascinating, and Madison, as you know, was very disappointed not to get that, and he tried to put it in again in the Bill of Rights, and it didn't get into the Bill of Rights either. So, there's some concerns there about the powers of states that are worth more discussion. So I don't think I need to say anything more about that. I think your choice of amending the Constitution to include the Voting Rights Act is a really interesting one, and a timely one. So you guys clearly you're well informed, and you're thinking about what the problems are today, and you're solving problems, right? Which is what they were doing at the Constitutional Convention. They were solving problems. They were also choosing not to solve problems, as you rightly point out. So how to be selective about your choice of problems to solve, and what to put off, and what to go after now. Man, those are responsibilities that we all have as citizens, and I think you guys are well prepared for that. So thank you. It was a good discussion.
Thank you so much for judging us today.
Thank you for taking the time out of your weekend, judges.
Seems there are no other comments, so I'm going to stop.
No, hang in there, Sam, because I blew something, and that is the fact that this has not been easy. You all not only ought to be congratulated, but your teacher is. I needed to be sure and acknowledge the fact. Remarkable times. You all did an excellent, remarkable job. I'm sorry, I forgot. I needed to do that. Thank you, Sam.